Thanks for coming, everybody. It's really cold outside today. Um, my name's Sarah, if you guys don't know, and I think I've been part of this community for probably, I don't know, like 15-ish years. I don't really know.
I think so.
Does that sound about right to me? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the title of my Dharma talk is Embodying Death, Embodying Life. And I'll just share that I work also as a hospice social worker. So I'll be pulling a lot just from my experience with that and how that has, I don't know, shaped my practice and how I let it shape me. And so I thought it would be kind of relevant. Okay, so do you guys know This American Life?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you don't know, it's a radio program on NPR, and gosh, it's been around forever, since like the 90s, I think. And so every show has a theme, and then within that theme, there's like these different segments that relate to that theme. And then there was one show, it was years ago, and I don't even remember what the theme of it was, but the intro part of it was called Happiness Watch. And it has stuck with me ever since I heard it. And so what it is, this Happiness Watch, I don't even know if they make it anymore. It's like from some Scandinavian country, I think. But the idea is it's a watch, and what happens is that you purchase the watch, and then I think you go to their website, and then you enter in a bunch of vital statistics and just maybe some general medical history, and it spits back out to you a kind of life expectancy time, and it's a conceit, right? Because we can walk out of our house any given day and get hit by a bus. It's but the idea is that you sync your watch to it, and I went online and I looked at the watch at the time, and it literally, what it is, whatever that date is, it's a literal countdown timer that you see on your watch. It's bigger than the actual time, the whole reason you look at your watch, but it's just right there, front and center. And so the show decided that they wanted to do was buy up a bunch of these watches, give them to some interns and employees, and they were like, wear this, do the thing, wear it for a week, report back to us and tell me how your week was. And I thought it was so interesting because I think it was a small group, maybe 12 people. It was almost split evenly down the middle. So one group basically was this was the worst week of my life, did not care for this, have the watch back, no thank you, I was distracted, I was anxious, I was, blah, blah, blah. And then if you might be able to guess, the other group was this is the best week I've had in a long time. They're I have felt more present, gratitude, all of this stuff, I'm keeping the watch, thank you so much. And so I thought that was really interesting, and I'm sure, for obvious reasons, we can relate to probably either side of that. And the first group, though, that did not have a wonderful time that week, I obviously, I can understand that, we can't speak to any individual reason, but we can all kind of agree, I think, that we grow up and we are conditioned by a culture that doesn't do a really good job at normalizing death. And I don't know, it can even feel a little taboo, even just to talk about it. And that's a shame. That's a real shame. Because I believe that being curious about and normalizing and kind of inviting death awareness into your life is beneficial, because we're all gonna die, and two, it's a missed opportunity to allow our death to shape and inform our lives right now. And so just right off the bat, before I even get into it, I just want to disabuse anyone of the idea that I feel that I know how I'm going to react when it's my time, like when it's my time to die. I'm very aware I could like commit to some practice until like literally the end of my days, and I still won't know like how I'm going to react. And part of that, the reason is because I've seen many times people, like some of my patients who have been on our services on hospice for like months and months, and they're very oriented. They understand the implications. They understand, the implications of being on hospice. They understand they have a terminal disease. And for all intents and purposes, they, throughout that time, more or less communicate a sense of like peace and acceptance of what's happening. And not all the time, but it's common that those same people, when they actually start to transition, they nonetheless feel this like really deep sense of like shock, like it's shocking. And if that happens, like it's a phase, it passes, because eventually the body takes over and the body knows what to do, but for, I think, our constructed selves, it's shocking. Because when it starts to happen in the body, it's not a concept anymore. Like, that's what I feel like is shocking to our constructed selves, is when we start to experience it in the body. And for that reason, it suddenly became kind of important to me to have some kind of a death awareness practice that I could practice every day, but also one that doesn't just touch on the idea of death. Like, I wanted something that kind of lived inside my body. And so that being the case, one thing that I like to do, like when we start talking about like these ideas and concepts, is just, define the terms. And so when I say embodied, just, to illustrate it. So every Sunday, many of us, we come to the Zen Center, we like file into the Zendo, and we sit down on our bottoms and we stare at a wall, and for the next half hour, like we just sit collectively. And like for all intents and purposes, that's what's happening, from the outside. But we, of course, understand that there's a lot more going on than that. What we specifically understand ourselves to be doing over and over and over, which is the very bottom of this practice, it's the base, is that we are returning to our bodies. We're returning to our bodies over and over and over. And so in that way, Zazen is fundamentally, it's a body practice. Now, lucky for us, in Zen Buddhism, there's also, like, along with this like body practice of Zazen, there's also this like really rich tradition of centering death and dying as a component of Zen Buddhist practice. So much so, there's even that phrase, and maybe, I don't know, how many have heard the phrase dying on the cushion in Zen Buddhist practice? Maybe, yeah. No? Okay. Man, I've heard it a bunch. Okay, it's just me? So there's a phrase called, dying on the cushion. And so the two things that I've talked about here so far are Zen as an embodied practice, and also Zazen. So Zazen as embodied practice, and Zazen as dying on the cushion. So as a body practice, meaning specifically we're sitting upright, we're feeling the breath, we're grounding through the body. And in Zen Buddhism practice, the body is the mind. Like in this practice, there's no like spiritual self that's like floating above and around or whatnot. The body itself is the mind, the body mind. And I feel like this is kind of a central component of Dogen's teaching, like when he talks about body and mind dropping off. which body and mind dropping off, I also kind of believe is maybe like a component of this idea of dying on the cushion. To me, I don't know, you might have to ask him, I don't know, but kind of paradoxically, body mind dropping off happens not by transcending the body, it happens when we are actually fully embodied, so fully and profoundly embodied that body mind drops off. And what happens, as far as I understand it, is that what's actually happening there is that when we're fully inhabiting the body mind and dropping off, is that it's a kind of loosening of identification with whatever it is. It's a loosening, there's a felt kind of dissolution of that felt kind of like separate self that can happen, like, sometimes you can sit on the cushion, you just feel like a kind of like a bag of meat sitting there. Other times maybe you might have like a cool dramatic experience of that, but like on some level it almost, and everything in between, but on some level like it almost doesn't even matter because the practice remains the same. And so then we have these two things then. We have our embodied practice of Zazen / dying on the cushion. And when we have that, I feel like what I'm interested in is I'm interested in the through line between this over here and what my experience will be of when it's my time, like when it's my time to pass. And I want to know specifically what that through line is. And for me specifically, I guess I can only speak from my experience, but it seems as if it is very simply, it's non-grasping. That's what we're cultivating here when we commit to commit to this practice. It's an ask, a thing we're asking of ourselves, and that's what's happening over here when we start our dying process. But over here, it's not an ask anymore, it's a requirement. And so as much as I am able in my life to try and bridge that gap as much as I can, I guess will be kind of an interesting experiment. But that non-grasping when we're sitting on the cushion, that's exactly what we're doing. When you think about it, like a thought rises in awareness, like we clock it, we return to the breath, or an emotion rises in our awareness through the body, and emotions can be trickier, but we feel it, we make space for it, like maybe it feels great, maybe it doesn't feel good at all, but we don't grasp at it or push it away, which is another iteration of grasping, and we don't judge it. We just allow ourselves to fully feel it without owning it, without identifying with it. And we just give it space to pass like a wave. And then by repeating this gesture, this release, like allowing over and over and over again, what we're doing is we're starting to loosen that identification with all the thoughts and the feelings and the stories that we use to create a constructed self. And to be clear, I'm not advocating for getting rid of thoughts and feelings and stories. Like, we need stories to make sense of our lives, to organize our experiences and to relate to other people. Where we get tripped up is, and where we create suffering for ourselves, is when we mistake our stories as our fundamental nature. But that is what we're loosening, like the identification. And when we practice non-grasping in an embodied way with our body mind, the byproduct is loosening identification. So what became interesting for me, though, when I started this work, what I realized pretty quickly is that in my supposed body practice wasn't actually as embodied as I thought it was. Meaning specifically, I knew what it was to practice non-grasping with the thoughts, feelings, stories, all of that was very familiar to me. But it wasn't until I started serving people who were going through the dying process themselves that I realized, and it sounds so obvious to say, it's comical, but that how primal the attachment to and identification with the body is. Like thoughts, feelings, stories, emotions, yeah, sure. But the body suddenly to me became like very front and center. And which is like, despite my 15-ish years of doing this practice, I haven't really been touching on this identification with the body, which might be the most primal identification. I mean, it's like the survival instinct. It's like we protect our bodies. We want our bodies to survive. We very much as humans identify with and are attached to our bodies. I mean, I think that's pretty fair to say. And I just did not give this much thought until I started being like around it. So in my practice, after I started working in hospice, the more kind of like salient question for me became then, if Zazen deepens embodiment, if we're getting more embodied, how does that loosen identification with the body? Like, as I said, super familiar with thoughts, feelings, stories, like that's not fundamental nature, you know, but attachment to the body felt like kind of a different animal. So lucky for me, I have this practice and I have Dogen who's been like telling me years and years that body and mind drops off, identification with, you know, that allowing, that release happens through the body. And so again, the practice remains the same. And to be clear, like I don't actually have an answer to this question that I've had. Like the only thing I can talk about really is how holding this question has changed my practice. And so that's kind of what I did. Like I just took it to the cushion and I just started getting curious about like my Zazen and what was happening. And what I started noticing was that on the cushion, when I was returning to my breath, I wasn't really, okay, and this is where I might struggle a little bit. I wasn't really like dropping in. Like I was returning to breath. Like I would clock something, I would return to breath, but I wasn't really fully embodying it. I was almost using like almost the idea of a breath as like a foil almost for thoughts, feelings, and stories without really dropping in. Which was a surprise. Like I didn't realize that's what was happening. So I started kind of toying around what, like, I'm like, can I do something, make a little tweak, do a little course correction? And one little tweak that like helped me immensely, and that was to basically like, instead of the full cycle of respiration, like in, out, I decided to see what would happen if I just focus on the exhale, on the out breath. And that helped me because I don't know, you know, it seemed like instead of this constant droning thing to pay attention to, I feel like it made it more of like a little bite-sized chunk for my attention. I could get like a toehold in there. And it shifted what happened for me when I returned to the breath. So kind of two things happened. I started feeling like noticing that the out breath like feels really good, like, which might sound like a silly thing to say, but I hadn't really noticed that before. And which makes sense because like the breath, the out breath it's the physical embodiment of letting go. It's what the body just does naturally. It's so natural. We choose and commit to training our attention to release whatever like it's holding in its grasp, but like the body already knows how to do that every time it exhales. And the other thing I noticed that when I started focusing just on my out breath, my attention felt sharper and more in focus, and I was able to stay with my body for longer periods without something else, you know, snagging my attention away, which eventually happens. But so there was that, and that was interesting. But then there was one more thing that happened that made it even more interesting to me. So doing the job that I do, I am often sitting with people who are at the very end of their lives, when their passing is imminent. And kind of because of this, like I'm very in touch with the truth that I have a finite number of exhales. Like I don't know what that number is, but there is a number, and every out breath that I take brings me closer to that final out breath that I will eventually take. And with that final release, that like final gesture of non-grasping, of letting go. And then that's when my practice really started shifting for me, because when I started holding my exhales inside of this like kind of wordless awareness of like, oh my gosh, I only get so many of these, it suddenly became like, and here's one right now, and here's one right now. And in doing that, that kind of allowed for me to access a kind of like present moment awareness that felt more like unencumbered to me and more like spacious and vivid. And it was just because of these like small little tweaks that I did. And then at some point after that, it dawned on me that this practice with the exhales and paying attention, because my exhales are numbered, like I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I am my own personal happiness watch. Like I don't even need a watch. Like I can just do this. And I do it everywhere. I do it in the car, I do it when I'm waiting in line at the grocery store, like anytime, you know. And so that's kind of been what my practice has been lately. And it's really interesting. And there is an unexpected outcome of this practice too for me and this was kind of a surprise, is that because of this practice, this is, I think, literally the first time in my life where I have actually like literally come to like love my body, like love this body. And my job plus this practice has really put me in touch with how like remarkable and fleeting my and your, like our bodies are. And sometimes like when I contemplate, like awe is the only appropriate word. Like our bodies are like crazy miracles. It's crazy. Like, you know, our bodies fight infections and they heal scrapes and bruises. Like we don't have to think about it. Like it just happens. And, and of course I'm able-bodied too, so that shapes my experience. Like somebody who has to move through their days with more functional limitations has a very different experience. But even holding that in awareness for me makes me really appreciate my senses and like my legs that work and my hands that work and like to get me to where I need to go and do the things I need to do. And then I mean, also, like, I'm a mother, and so, like, this body has grown 2 children, like 2 humans inside of it, and then twice served as, like, a literal portal for these 2 people to come out into the world and, like, have their own human experiences with their own human bodies. And that is, like, wild to me. That's, like, sci-fi. I don't know. And then when it comes time, if I go out because of a normal natural disease progression, I know that this body knows how to die. And if I don't die like a sudden unexpected death, you know, and it is due to natural normal disease progression, I know that this body will start like eating less and sleeping more. And then once it gets to a point of actually starting to transition, I know that the breaths will become like shallower and irregular at times. And I know that as I get closer, the sense of time passing will start to feel less like linear. It's possible that I might start like getting my days and nights mixed up. And I know that everything will start to take on a kind of like dreamlike quality. It's also very possible, because it's super duper common, that I will start to get visits from deceased loved ones. And also very possible, because it's also super common, like as I get closer, it's possible that I will start to see beautiful lights in the space around me, in the room. And I won't know what they are, and I don't know what they are now. But all that is possible. And then eventually, like as I get towards the end, very near the end, the pauses between my breaths will get longer and longer until I release that very final exhale. And then everything will be let go. Because just like this body knows how to breathe, this body knows how to let go. And it's that exact same letting go, that non-grasping, that we are practicing when we're sitting on the cushion. And our bodies naturally do it in our exhales, in our out breaths. And so we practice it in our awareness when we choose to allow and release and return to the body. And our bodies naturally know how to do it. And so I think more or less at this point I understand that our practice, my practice, is just to learn how to kind of lovingly get out of the way. So, and that's my Dharma.